Welcome, everyone, to today's podcast of Personal Growth Recipes with your host, Ron Denner. Now, today's podcast is a subject from an author by the name of John Maxwell. John's written many books on the subject of leadership and trying to just add value to people. And today, what I want to do is share a message I'm going to call 4 Perspectives About Possessions. One thing I want to note about this message today, I gave this message about a month ago at our Savior's Lutheran Church. Our minister was gone on a Sunday, so I did the message for that particular Sunday. So it has a sermon feel to it, and it's a good lesson, and hopefully you'll get some good information out of this. So just a little side note on that, okay? So let's begin here. Our perspective has such a big impact in how we see life and what we get from life and what we see about other people, different people, different things. So it has so much to do with how we see life and who we become. So let me give you some perspective principles. Number 1, how we view things determines how we do things. In other words, our behavior always follows our perspective. Number 2, what you see is who you will be. In other words, what we see attracts us to the kind of person that we will become. Number 3, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So many times, we want to change other people, don't we? And if you've been married long enough, you want to sometimes just change your spouse. But what we need to do is to change how we look at our spouse. And number 4, what I believe about life determines how I perceive life, which determines what I receive from life. Perspective is huge in determining the person that you're going to become. So I want to shift gears here now, and I'm going to read you the words from a dog's diary and a cat's diary, just to give you the difference in perspective. So a dog's diary and a cat's diary. This is from a dog's diary. It's 8 o'clock a.m. Dog food, my favorite thing. 9:30 a.m. A car ride, my favorite thing. 11 o'clock a.m. A walk in the park, my favorite thing. 12 noon, I got lunch, my favorite thing. 1 p.m., I got rubbed and petted, my favorite thing. 3 p.m., I got to play ball, my favorite thing. You see a trend here? 5 o'clock p.m., more dog food, my favorite thing. 8 o'clock p.m., watch TV with the people, my favorite thing. 10 p.m., sleeping on the bed, my favorite thing. Now we're going to shift over. Here's excerpts from a cat's diary. A cat. Day 983 of my captivity. My captors continue to taunt me with bizarre little dangling objects. The only thing that keeps me going is my dream of escape. So there you have it. The different perspectives of a cat and a dog. We have 4 different perspectives about our possessions. So I'm going to use the story of the Good Samaritan to illustrate this. Now, the Good Samaritan story is found in the Gospel of Luke in the Bible. And it's in the 10th chapter, verses 25 through 37, if you ever want to reference it. In that story, there's 3 perspectives. And I'm going to go beyond and just give you a 4th perspective about possessions, beyond those other 3. Now, in this story, Jesus explained that we are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and to love your neighbors as yourself. Well, a lawyer then asked Jesus, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus replied with this story. Okay, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. So they stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and they went away, leaving him half dead. Now, a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by over onto the other side of the street. So too, a Levite, when he saw where he came to the place and saw him, he also passed by onto the other side of the road. So these two gentlemen just walked across the other side of the street to avoid him. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, so he took pity on him. He went up to the guy and he bandaged his wounds. He poured oil and wine on them to try to soothe the pain. And then he put the man on his own donkey. He took him to an inn, and he took care of him. So the next day he took out 2 silver coins, and he gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense that you may have. Now, which of these 3 men do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? Well, the lawyer replied, well, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Now, that's the Good Samaritan story. Go and do likewise, okay? So let's look at this story in more detail here. The first perspective is the perspective of the robbers. So let's look at the robbers' perspective. Now, these robbers, they beat him up and they took his stuff. So here's their perspective. What's yours is mine, and I'm going to take it. And probably right now, a lot of us are thinking, well, that's not us. That's not me. We don't go around robbing people, hopefully, right? But I want you to stop and think about something. I want to talk to you about little toddlers, say, 2-year-old to 5-year-olds as an example. Now, I would contend that we were all born with a little bit of robber in all of us. So let's look at a toddler's perspective about possessions. So here's how a toddler would view their possessions or their toys, okay? This is a toddler speaking, okay, if they would, okay? If I like it, it's mine. If I can take it away from you, it's mine. If I had it for a while, it's mine. If it looks like mine, it's mine. If you're having fun with it, it's mine. If you lay it down, it's mine. And my favorite, if it's broken, it's yours. Now, if you really stop and think about it, we all start out as toddlers with that robber mentality. And fortunately, many of us grow out of this as we reach adulthood. But, unfortunately, many people do not grow out of it. And if you really want proof, just look at the entitlement mentality that's so evident in our society today. So let's go on to the second perspective here. That's the perspective of the Levite and the priest. Now, as you recall, they're the ones who saw the man when he was beaten up, and they crossed over to the other side of the road just to avoid him. So that perspective about possessions is this. What's mine is mine, and I'm going to keep it. In other words, when they saw a person with tremendous needs, they didn't share, they didn't help, they didn't stop. But from their viewpoint, they thought, see, I know you have a problem. That's unfortunate. But what's mine is mine, and I'm going to keep it. Just to kind of give you an example here, there was a father who took his young son to McDonald's, and the son wanted some French fries. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think McDonald's is known for their taste quality of their food overall, but I'll say with one exception, their French fries. I don't know about you, I love McDonald's French fries. So the father hands his son the French fries, and he began to eat them. About a minute later, the dad reaches over to take a French fry, and the son just pushes his hand away and says, "These are mine, and you can't have any." Well, the dad was kind of surprised and saddened by his son's reaction and his selfishness. So the dad is thinking to himself, he doesn't understand. I'm the source of those fries. I paid for them. And without me, he doesn't get them in the first place. And the second thought the dad has is, if I can take those fries from him, if that's going to be his attitude, I'll just take them away. And the third thought that the dad had was, I don't need his fries. I can go up to the counter, just buy my own fries. But what really bothered the dad is his son's selfish attitude. You see, when all the dad really wanted to do is just sit down and share some fries with his son. You see, if your perspective about possessions is what's mine is mine and I'm going to keep it, really you and I are pretty much that boy at McDonald's. And what's difficult for us to understand is that we are really not the true source of our possessions. God is really the source of our possessions. And God doesn't need any of our possessions or our money, but what God does want is for us to share together. You see, selfishness and significance are incompatible words. We can't be a totally selfish person and live a significant life. One of the hardest lessons to understand, and I struggle with this as well, is that the more that we give away of something, the more we get back in return. Now, logically, it would seem to be the opposite. So if you give away kindness, more kindness will come back. If we give away comfort, more comfort comes back. It doesn't have to be just money that we give away here. You see, God wants us to be a river and not a reservoir. He's only going to give to you and I what he knows will flow through us. The third perspective is the perspective of the Good Samaritan. Now let's look at from his perspective. And that perspective is what's mine is yours, and I'm going to give it. So if you remember from the story, when the Good Samaritan, when he saw the man who was robbed, he stopped, he went over, and he took care of the man. He took him to an inn, and he paid for his stay at the inn. Now look at look at all the similarities of these three men: the priest, the Levite, and the Good Samaritan. Here's the three similarities. Number one, they all saw the problem that the man had been beaten and robbed. Number two, they all had an opportunity to help. And number three, they all had a reason not to help. And the reason that people who have the attitude of what's mine is mine, they don't stop to help is because it inconveniences them. It's really, it's kind of uncomfortable. As they say, the worst excuse is a good excuse. The bad excuses really don't mess us up much. It's not the bad ones, but man, when it's the good excuses, it's going to screw up my schedule. It's going to cost me time and money. Those are the ones that kind of mess us up. Okay. So the priest and the Levite probably had a place that they were expecting to get to, and stopping to help would have messed up their plans, and they would be pretty much inconvenienced. And the priest and the Levite had an inside perspective. It was all about them, whereas the Good Samaritan had an outside perspective. You see, I believe the Good Samaritan asked himself, if I don't stop, what's going to happen to him? He's already half dead, and if I don't stop, he's probably going to die. And the Good Samaritan also asked himself another question. If I don't stop, what's going to happen to me? If I don't stop, my heart will eventually become cold and indifferent. And there's going to be a day when his heart would become cold and calloused. You see, I believe the Good Samaritan asked himself, if I do stop, what will happen to me? If I do stop, I'll make a difference. The question is, do we want to make a difference in the lives of other people? They say a person first starts to live when he can live outside of himself. When I look around, especially in this area that we live in geographically, I see a lot of those Good Samaritan attitudes and practices in people's daily lives. I've traveled to larger cities, and I'm sure that these good qualities do exist there also. And, we sometimes get picked on for living a slower, simpler lifestyle, kind of living out here in the boondocks, right? But I've also seen how neighbors are more willing to help their fellow neighbors out where we live. I kind of wish that same level of generosity would take place in our urban areas. Just my opinion. The fourth perspective is, and this is the fourth one I was telling you about, what's mine is not mine, and I'm going to manage it. In other words, they see possessions entirely different. They know that the possessions they have are not really their possessions. So where does this thought come from? Well, once again, we're referenced in the Bible, the book of Psalms, chapter 24, the first verse, it says, it's just a real simple sentence, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. These all belong to God. In other words, what's mine is not mine, and I'm going to manage it. Let me give you an example. Suppose you had an important package you wanted to send to someone. So as a matter of fact, they wanted it and they needed it really bad. So you took the package down to overnight delivery. You gave them the address where to send it to, and you paid for the shipping costs. You went back home, and you called the person the next day, and hey, did you get the gift I sent out in overnight delivery? They said, no, nothing came. So you run back to the overnight delivery place and you tell them, hey, remember me? I bought the package yesterday. I bought this package in yesterday. My friend, he didn't get it. Well, the clerk says, well, I thought that package was for me. I mean, you brought it into me. If it wasn't for me, why'd you give it to me? Well, you're thinking, well, I gave it to you because you're the overnight delivery boy. And you see, you and I are just the overnight delivery boy, in this case for God, because it's really not our stuff. It's God's stuff. We're just here to manage it. That's all we are, you see. And really God blesses all of us with individual gifts and talents, money, opportunities. But it's really not ours, it's His. All we do is manage it. We don't want to be like that delivery boy and just hoard our gifts and talents, our monies and opportunities all to ourselves. And I just want to give you another way of looking at this, kind of a cute saying. I've never seen a U-Haul following a hearse. We can't take our possessions with us. And I'm not suggesting that we be irresponsible. We know we need to plan ahead for our loved ones that are left behind. But after that, we just don't get to take it with us. And over the years, what I've discovered is that there's one thing that I can tell you that'll have probably the biggest impact on your life, and that is this: how we think. How we think. Our perspective, how we see things, is going to have the biggest impact in your life. Okay? So let's in summary here, let's go over what we talked about. How we view things determines how we do things. And if I look at things with the attitude of what's in it for me versus how can I serve others, I'm going to struggle, whether it's in my personal life or my business life. Another principle is what you see is who you will be. We see things not as they are, but as we are. That explains, and this drives me nuts, but that explains why two people can witness the same event and come away with complete opposite interpretations. The third principle is when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. Once again, the example I can give you is if you're married or in a committed relationship and you want to change your spouse or your significant other, you really need to change the way you look at your spouse or significant other. And the fourth principle is what I believe about life determines how I perceive life, which determines what I receive from life. And, obedience to God is never understood on the front end. It can only be understood only on the back end. After you've obeyed, you learn the lesson. You see, you don't learn the lesson pre-obedience. You learn the lesson post-obedience. And with perspectives on possessions, you'll never think it through and it will never really make sense. You just have to do it. But the moment you make that kind of commitment to live that kind of life, you're going to begin to understand that there's a life for you that's bigger and better and more grand than anything you've ever imagined. And that's it, folks. That's my four 4 perspectives on possessions. I really want to thank you for listening to the podcast today. I invite you to tune in I'm going to rotate tentatively at this point my podcast on an every other week basis. So at this point, next Wednesday, I'm planning on a Biz Connections, my other podcast, BIZ Biz Connections podcast, and then come back in 2 weeks from Wednesday with another Personal Growth Recipes podcast. And you can find us on Facebook, YouTube. YouTube would be under Ron Denner. And, of course, I'll be putting out my next podcast. I'll announce it on my Facebook page. And until then, we'll talk to you next Wednesday. This is Ron Denner, your host for Personal Growth Recipes, serving up and signing off.